Okay, we're at round 2 now, where we are going to work on that lavender off the shoulder dress. I'm going ahead and pulling out my pattern pieces for the moment. Alright, directions, if we like to follow them. I'm going to peruse them real quick, see what they're at telling me to do. I'm going to try to figure out, remember that my camera's over here, but I'll probably look at myself, so I apologize. Okay, then. Alright, so first thing we're going to do, according to our directions, is find our front and back, which in this case is piece 1 and 2. There's piece 2. Figure out where I'm putting stuff. I apologize, this whole doing things by video is new to me. My daughter tells me that having a YouTube channel will make me cooler. I told her I don't think there's any help for me in that realm. Not entirely sure there's anything that can make me cool. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm pulling my pins out of my pattern. If you've marked your notches, that's fine. Again, as I've said, I do not. Just want to remember which one's the front and which one's the back. You can mark that if you want. This here, I'm taking pieces out of the front. What I frequently will do is, so this is the top of my front, I'll just take and put a safety pin, if I can pull one out of here, in it, just to tell me that it's the front. So just a little pin in it, like that, just so I know it's the front. Solely because the front and back on this are almost identical. Alright, one piece off. So here's the front of our dress. Yay, pretty fabric. Right. Sorry, I'm not doing things up where you guys can see them. As I've said, this is having this new, trying to do this from home is a little different, so I'm going to be setting up a studio for this here. Normally I do this in an office or a studio at work, but COVID has made that difficult. Alright, so now we have the back. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up both of these two pieces, and we're going to find the underarm right here, and we're going to pin the front and back together down both underarm seams. Do you have to pin it? If you know how to sew, you can probably get away with not pinning it. If you don't know how to sew, or you're trepidatious, or you know, whatever, or if you're ever working with velvet, pin the hell out of it, because velvet moves everywhere. This is cotton. I'm going to put a few in just for purposes of you guys seeing it. But I'm kind of a lazy sewer, and if I can get away with not doing something, I will. You guys would have seen in the video where I was cutting it out, I'm not super cautious. I don't make sure I have perfect cuts. I'm horrible. I'm like, well, we'll fix it in post. But now, ideally, I would normally be using, after I sew it, I like to serge them. However, my serger that I have here at home is currently locked up, and I have to get it worked on, so we're just going to be using a straight stitch. I'm also using this machine, which is an antique black and gold Singer featherweight. It is, oh, I don't know, I think it's a 1951 model. The reason I'm using this ultimately is because I like showing you guys how simple it can be. And so this machine only does a straight stitch. That's it. So that's all we're going to be using. You don't need anything more complicated than that to actually sew. You don't. If you are a beginner and you want to, I will sometimes, I've done this for people where I will take and I will go from my needle and I'll put a little measuring tool here and I'll put a piece of tape at 5/8 inch seam allowance, which is what most patterns call for. I don't have it on here now. I can do it later if it's helpful. But almost all modern patterns are going to have a 5/8 inch seam allowance. You should always check, but for the most part they do. Also bear in mind, most, especially Simplicity, but most pattern companies have a lot of wearing ease, which means that you're actually going to have a lot of extra room. This is problematic if you're making a corset pattern from someone like Simplicity or McCall's. They have wearing ease, which of course it should never have wearing ease because you're wearing it tight. So be aware that wearing ease, which is the extra space for you to move in it, a lot of these patterns have quite a bit of that. You will kind of have to gauge for yourself, but so we're going to go ahead and sew down one of these seams. Always backstitch when you're at the very beginning of a seam. Alright? Now I currently do not have a seam gauge on here, but let's hope that after as long as I've been sewing, I can general estimate how wide. Again, one of the things that are easiest for me is I find that if it makes it easier, put a little piece of tape along the edge and then just follow the tape at your 5/8 inch seam. Also, something like this, honestly, it's a kind of a loose, flowy dress. Err on the side of, well, it can be loose. Backstitch when you get to the bottom so your seam doesn't come undone. Clip your threads off, and we have one seam. Yay! Another option is if you want, you can do French seams. I can show you that later as well if somebody wants to learn how to do that. I'm learning how this whole YouTube subscriber stuff works. So ultimately, if you have a comment, you have a question, put it down and I will try to respond. Eventually, I'm going to try to do these videos where I can speed up when I'm cutting or just sewing a seam, so you just don't have to watch me do it for 3 years, but you know. I am pretty fast, but I will still try to keep these videos to where they're not, you know, 3 hours long. This is a simple project, but when we get into making cosplay stuff, it'll take a little longer. So when that happens, we'll want to make sure I can time-lapse the cutting process and like the pinning process, the sewing, you know, just so you can see how to do it without having to watch it in its entirety. Alright, again, backstitch. Backstitch at the end. And at this point, you have the new sheath of your dress constructed. Yay! Alright, we're at about 10 minutes, so I'm going to stop and we'll come back.